The rain lashed against the windows of the dimly lit house, an unrelenting storm that mirrored the turmoil in Lana's heart. The once warm and loving home had turned into a prison, a place where shadows of a toxic relationship loomed large. Lana, once vibrant and full of life, now sat in the suffocating silence of her marriage, her heart heavy with dread. Mark, her husband, lay in bed beside her, snoring softly, oblivious to the world around him. The glow from his phone, left carelessly on the nightstand, caught Lana's attention. It buzzed once, then twice, a bright notification piercing the darkness. Curiosity gnawed at her, mixed with a deep-seated fear she couldn't quite place. She hesitated, but only for a moment. She reached over and picked up the phone. What she found shattered her world. The message was from a woman named Emily, a name she didn't recognize. The words were casual, but the intimacy was unmistakable. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night," the message read. Lana's hand shook as she scrolled through their conversation, her heart pounding harder with each line. The messages revealed an affair that had been going on for months. There were texts filled with passion, love, and even plans for a future that didn't include her. The betrayal hit Lana like a freight train. Tears welled up in her eyes, and a wave of nausea rolled over her. Her husband, the man she had given everything to, was cheating on her without a hint of remorse. For days, she was consumed by this knowledge. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She started to spy on Mark, driven by a desperate need to know more. She followed him after he left for work, checked his emails, and listened in on his calls. What she found confirmed her worst fears: dinners, hotel bookings, gifts. Each discovery was like a knife twisting in her gut. One evening, when the weight of it all became too much, she decided to confront him. She waited until he came home, late again, his eyes bleary and his breath stinking of alcohol. She couldn't hold back any longer. "Who is Emily?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. Mark froze, his hand midway to loosening his tie. His eyes flickered with a brief flash of something: guilt? Annoyance? Before they hardened. He didn't bother to deny it. Instead, he sneered. "What does it matter? You were going to find out sooner or later," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. The words sliced through her like a knife. The man she had loved for years, the man she had built her life around, was standing before her, dismissing her like she was nothing. Rage flared within her, but before she could say another word, Mark grabbed her by the arm, his grip bruising. He dragged her through the house, ignoring her protests and pleas. He shoved her into the small storage room in the basement and locked the door behind her. The room was dark, cold, and damp, the air heavy with the scent of mildew. There was no way out. She was trapped. Days passed. Mark kept her imprisoned, bringing down food and water as if she were an animal. He taunted her, mocking her pain and helplessness. He told her that no one would believe her if she escaped, that she had no one but him. Lana's world shrank to that small, suffocating room, her mind spiraling into a dark abyss of fear and despair. But Lana was not going to be broken so easily. Desperation gave birth to determination. She started paying attention to Mark's routine: when he came down, how much he drank, how long he stayed unconscious on the couch. She knew she had to act when he was at his most vulnerable. One night, when the house was silent, except for the sound of Mark's snores echoing through the thin walls, Lana decided to make her move. She had noticed that, lately, Mark had been drinking more heavily, his grip on her weakening with each passing day. That night, he had passed out on the couch in the living room after finishing off a bottle of whiskey. Quietly, she pushed open the door to the basement. Mark, in his drunken stupor, had left it unlocked. Lana's heart pounded in her chest as she crept up the stairs, her senses on high alert. The house was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside that cast long shadows on the walls. She could hear Mark's deep, rhythmic breathing coming from the living room. She walked into the kitchen and grabbed a large, sharp knife from the block. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was firm. This was her only chance. She had to end this nightmare once and for all. With the knife clutched tightly in her hand, Lana approached the couch where Mark lay sprawled, unconscious. His face was peaceful, almost serene, but she knew the monster that lurked beneath. She hovered over him, her breath quick and shallow, the blade glinting in the dim light. She hesitated, her mind racing with memories of their life together, good and bad. But the thought of what he had done, and what he was likely to do if she didn't act, solidified her decision. In one swift, determined motion, she plunged the knife into his chest. Mark's eyes flew open, shock and pain twisting his features. He tried to scream, but the sound was muffled as blood filled his lungs. Lana pulled the knife out and struck again and again, each thrust releasing the pent-up terror and rage that had consumed her for weeks. Finally, Mark's body went limp, his eyes glassy and vacant. The house fell silent, save for Lana's ragged breathing. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at Mark's lifeless body, the reality of what she had done sinking in. The room felt colder, the walls closing in around her as she realized there was no turning back. She had to get rid of the body. Moving with mechanical precision, Lana wrapped Mark's corpse in a tarp from the garage. The smell of blood and death clung to her, making her gag, but she forced herself to continue. She dragged the body to his car, struggling under the weight, and stuffed it into the trunk. The drive to the remote woods was a blur, her mind numb to everything but the task at hand. She buried him in a shallow grave, the wet earth quickly swallowing the evidence of her crime. When she returned home, she meticulously cleaned every trace of blood, every sign of a struggle. She hid the bloody knife in the bathroom, tucking it behind the plumbing. The tarp, used to wrap Mark's body, was discreetly stored in the basement. She burned the clothes she had worn and scrubbed the floors until they gleamed. By the time she was finished, the first light of dawn was creeping through the windows. Exhausted but determined, Lana dialed 911. She reported Mark missing, her voice trembling with a carefully constructed blend of fear and concern. The police arrived shortly after, questioning her about the last time she had seen him. She lied through her teeth, her performance flawless. She played the role of the distraught wife to perfection. For a while, it seemed like she might actually get away with it. The police were more interested in Mark's affair than his home life. They quickly discovered the messages from Emily, the hotel booking, the secret phone calls. Emily became their prime suspect, and Lana breathed a sigh of relief. But as days turned into weeks, the investigation didn't go away. The detectives kept digging, asking questions, connecting dots. They started coming around more frequently, probing Lana's story, testing her alibi. The pressure mounted, and Lana found herself unraveling. She barely slept, haunted by the memory of Mark's final moments, by the fear that the truth would eventually come out. Then, one night, as she was lying in bed, she heard a faint sound, a creak, like the shifting of weight on the floor. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she was alone in the house, wasn't she? She strained her ears, trying to catch the sound again. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be the police? Had they found something? Or was it her own guilt manifesting, playing tricks on her? Slowly, she got out of bed and crept toward the stairs, her breath shallow and her heart pounding in her ears. The darkness seemed to press in from all sides, and every creak of the floorboards beneath her feet sounded like a gunshot in the eerie silence of the house. She reached the top of the stairs and peered down into the gloom below. The only light came from the faint glow of the street lamp outside, casting long, sinister shadows on the walls. She strained her eyes, trying to discern if anyone was down there. Then she saw it, a figure standing in the living room, its back turned to her. Lana's breath caught in her throat. It was a woman, her silhouette unmistakable in the dim light. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized the familiar figure. It was Emily. Emily stood motionless, her head slightly tilted as if she were listening for something. In one hand, she clutched a large knife, its blade catching the faint light and glinting ominously. With her other hand, she reached out and gently traced her fingers along the picture of Mark that hung on the wall. The sight sent a chill down Lana's spine. Lana's mind raced. How could Emily be here? How had she found her? Panic surged through her veins, and she quickly retreated back to her room, her footsteps as silent as possible. She closed the door behind her. She needed to think to figure out what to do next. Her eyes darted around the room, and her gaze fell on the knife she had hidden in the bathroom, the same knife she had used to kill Mark. With trembling hands, she grabbed the knife and slid it under the bed, her breath coming in shallow, rapid gasps. She needed to be ready. She needed to protect herself. Her mind buzzed with fear and confusion, the darkness closing in around her. As she lay under the bed, her body pressed against the cold floor, she tried to steady her breathing. Her phone was clutched in her hand, but when she pressed the power button, it didn't respond. The battery was dead. She was alone, with no way to call for help. Suddenly, she heard the sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and growing closer. Lana's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to the soft creaking of the floorboards. The footsteps paused outside her bedroom door, and for a moment there was only silence. Then the doorknob turned with a slow, deliberate twist. Lana held her breath, her body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. The door creaked open, and the footsteps resumed, this time softer, almost cautious. From under the bed, Lana could see Emily's feet moving across the floor. She watched as Emily searched the closet, then the bathroom. Finally, she saw Emily's feet stop at the edge of the bed. Lana's heart raced, her mind screaming at her to stay hidden, to stay silent. But then Emily knelt down, and their eyes met. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Lana could see the cold, calculating look in Emily's eyes, the gleam of madness that sent a jolt of terror through her. In a blur of motion, Emily's hand grasped Lana's ankle, and she yanked her out from beneath the bed. Lana scrambled to grab the knife she had hidden, but Emily was quicker. The two women grappled fiercely in the confined space of the room, their movements frantic and desperate. Emily's knife slashed through the air, narrowly missing Lana as she ducked and dodged. Lana fought back with her own blade, her hands trembling but her resolve unyielding. The struggle was intense, their bodies tangled in a violent clash of survival. Each swing of the knife, each desperate move, was a fight for their very lives. With one final surge of strength, Lana managed to wrest the knife from Emily's grip and drive it into her side. Emily gasped, her eyes widening in shock. She tried to retaliate, but the pain was too overwhelming. Lana's final thrust drove the blade deep into Emily's chest. Emily's body convulsed, her eyes reflecting a mix of terror and disbelief before she fell lifelessly to the floor. Lana lay there, gasping for breath, her body trembling with exhaustion and shock. The room was eerily silent, the only sound the ragged gasps of her own breathing. She stared down Emily's lifeless body, her mind numb with the horror of what she had done. She knew she had to act quickly. The same cold, methodical determination that had driven her to dispose of Mark's body took over. She dragged Emily's body down the stairs, her muscles screaming in protest, and repeated the gruesome process she had gone through with Mark. She wrapped the body in a tarp, cleaned the bloodstains from the floor, and drove out to the same remote woods. The night was darker this time, the storm having moved on, leaving only a suffocating stillness in its wake. She buried Emily beside Mark, the wet earth swallowing her once again. By the time she returned home, the first light of dawn was breaking through the clouds, casting a pale, ghostly glow over the house. Lana sat on the edge of her bed, her mind a blank slate. She had done it. She had survived. But at what cost? The weight of her actions settled on her like a heavy shroud, suffocating her with its oppressive presence. The police continued their investigation, but with no bodies and no evidence, the case eventually went cold. Mark and Emily were officially listed as missing persons, presumed to have run off together. Lana played the part of the grieving wife, the heartbroken victim of betrayal, and no one suspected a thing. But the guilt never left her. It clung to her like a shadow, haunting her every waking moment and visiting her in her nightmares. The house, once her sanctuary, had become a prison of her own making, filled with the ghosts of the past that would never let her go. In the end, Lana knew she had escaped justice, but she would never escape the horrors of her own mind. And that, she realized, was a punishment far worse than any prison. If you enjoyed this chilling tale and want to hear more dark and twisted stories, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember, the darkest secrets are often hidden in plain sight, so stay vigilant and always trust your instincts. Until next time, keep the lights on and stay curious.